positions throughout the assembly, leadership, and was voted in by acclamation as the leader of the Republican conference. I'm very excited to work with Will and what this year is going to bring us. We have already had great success in the recruitment class of 2020. We'll get into a little bit of that today, talking about some of our candidates that are out there trying to gain seats. We're trying to get this assembly minority and break that veto-proof majority. It would be an extremely big feather in the Republican Party's cap to continue to grow, this conference. Many of the great ideas, there's so many bad things that come out of the state legislature. A lot of the best things have started in the Assembly Republican Conference. And that has long been, the ideas factory of, whether it's a property tax cap or several of the other, big initiatives that have Democrats have stolen the idea and run with it. They started with Assembly Republicans. But Will Barclay, he's the right leader for the time. He's someone that brings the expertise, the temperament, and the skill set to help us grow this team. And we're excited to have him. Leader, thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I was elected in January to be leader, and you said new leader, but I feel like with everything going on, I feel like I've been leader for about 10 years now with this pandemic and then all the issues we had before the pandemic ever hit. But no, it is an honor for me to lead the Republicans in the State Assembly, and it's an honor and privilege for me to be here with you doing this town hall meeting. I just want to say thank you, Chairman, for the great work you're doing for the party. You're bringing a lot of energy to it. I think it's great. It makes me very bullish on our chances as Republicans in November. And I know, this COVID-19 is kind of dominating all the conversations, whether it's political conversations or other type of conversations. So I think it's great that you're doing these virtual town hall meetings. It's a great way to keep people engaged, and it's a great way. I enjoyed being here. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and the honor to be here. Do you want me to go? How do you want to run it? Do you want
me just give us an update.
What's going on? Or?
Yeah, sure. Why don't we start off with an update, and then I'll ask you a few questions, and then we've got a lot of folks on the line here, and we'll hear directly from you. If you want to join by video, hit the raise your hand function to ask a question, or you can type a question in for us to read and ask Will.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, I am back in Albany. I don't say this very often, but I'm happy the legislature is back meeting again. It's about time we reassert our power as a co-equal branch of government. As you know, back in March, the legislature gave the governor some extraordinary powers to help deal with the pandemic. And not surprisingly, the governor's taken those powers and really run with them. I think he's issued something like 33 executive orders. And as a result of those executive orders, he's changed something like 260 laws. So he's living up to the moniker King Cuomo, unfortunately. And I think initially, Chairman, I think people were kind of fine with that leadership. I mean, we were facing some real unknowns with the pandemic, but as things gone on, I think people are starting to lose patience, and rightfully so. His directives have been far-ranging. They're not even necessarily always dealing with the pandemic. He's done everything from business closures, school board elections, protocols for driving golf carts, beach, how to sit on the beach. And so it seems like it's really an overreach. And why should one man be able to control the lives of 19.5 million New Yorkers? So we feel very strong. We're facing some big challenges in the state. We got, unemployment benefits. The unemployment, we're 1.6 million people are unemployed in New York State and growing. We have a budget deficit that's going to be anywhere between $12 to $13 billion. So we just can't leave these decisions all up to the governor. The legislature we are back, fortunately, and active, and we need to be a co-equal branch of government and come back and maybe push back on a lot of stuff the governor's pushing.
Well, you had an excellent op-ed about stripping back the powers to the legislature. We sent it out to our entire lists. I mean, I felt so strongly about it, just showing that Republicans were taking the lead on this issue. We have a representative democracy. We've been living under a dictatorship for the last 90 days, and it is critically important for the legislature, Carl Hastie, Andrew Stewart Cousins, as they lead the Senate and the Assembly, to get back to work and take the power back. We need to have co-equal branches of government. That is not happening right now. The governor makes the rules up and changes the rules as he goes on a whim. I mean, you notice when he gets a little bit of public pressure, all of a sudden we're going to recalculate how we do reopenings in like magic. Oh, now you fit the criteria after an editorial or a negative story hits. Obviously, we have the catastrophe of the nursing home tragedies that have gone on at the directive of Andrew Cuomo and the Department of Health. There are so many questions that need to be answered. I think it's far time that, and we called on the legislature, and I think I was pretty bold in saying, get your ass back to work
Right.
about 3 weeks ago, because there was, certainly the New York City members would have been safer up at the Capitol than they would have been in the city. There was no reason that we couldn't do this. And now with remote voting, they can function from anywhere. I'm not a huge fan of remote voting for the state legislature, or this embarrassment that is now in the House of Representatives of proxy voting. I see Representative Tunko has given his vote to a different member because he was afraid to go to the Capitol. That's an embarrassment. I see a lot of our Republican legislators have made the trip to Albany, even if they're functioning from their office, and bravo. I mean, that's leadership. They were elected to do a job. They knew the risks going in, and I think a lot of our members have taken that seriously. So what is the discussion level right now as you talk, leader to leader with Hasty, or, what is the appetite for the legislature to pull back that responsibility and power that was given to Andrew to, handle COVID?
So it's two things. I think you talk privately with any Democrat, and they're as frustrated, legislative Democrat, they're as frustrated with this governor as any Republican will say publicly. But, the governor is a vindictive guy, and I don't think a lot of those Democrats want to come out publicly and push back on him because they're worried about what the consequences will be. But, even that being said, though, Chairman, I think we have an opportunity to work in a bipartisan manner to pull back on some of the governor's powers. And it won't obviously correct the problems that we faced, in this past pandemic, but there's a reason why we have to let the legislature get back in session. We have to look for the future. Who knows if this pandemic will rear its ugly head again? We'll have to go into another state of emergency. But the Republican Minority Conference, we introduced some legislation yesterday, which I think is a great piece of legislation. The guy out your way, Andy Goodell, was actually the guy that drafted it, Simon Goodell. But essentially, it wouldn't allow this governor, under this current law, he just has the power to declare a state of emergency throughout the whole state, and then he can just kind of come up with these executive orders doing whatever he thinks he has to. This puts some guardrails on that, and he would require the state of emergency to be declared in every county. So the governor would have to declare it in all 62 counties. The individual counties can appeal that decision. So in this pandemic, as you're aware of, let's take Chautauqua County, for instance, out west. They didn't have that many cases of COVID. In fact, I don't think they've had an infection for a couple of weeks. There's no reason that country is completely shut down. It doesn't serve a public health purpose. So they could appeal, under our legislation, they could appeal that decision, and then the governor would have to give a state a reason why, and presumably if it's not a good enough reason, they could sue the governor. I know it's a little bit of a long shot, but at least it's something. And then they also put a time limit on it. So currently now the governor's executive powers go until next April, I think a whole year. This, which seems crazy now in hindsight. This bill would only be for 30 days, and then he could extend it for 15 days. But after that 45-day period, you'd have to go to the legislature to get legislative approval for extensions. So it's those types of bills. Obviously, you mentioned the nursing homes. We have the unemployment benefits. We ought to be having hearings on that, and to make sure, both the nursing home and the unemployment benefits, those are ongoing problems. So we should be addressing those quickly, forthright, because those things have to be fixed. Doing this state of emergency type legislation is more proactive, prospective, but it still something needs to be done. So I'm completely in agreement. I think, for instance, that taking the state of emergency, I think we can get some movement on that, because as I said, the Democrats, they might not say it publicly, but they're irritated with the way the governor's been acting.
Well, we have a complete lack of disregard for local elected leaders as well. They've been held hostage by the rules changes and the usurping of power by the governor. I mean, any county executive has to go appeal to the governor for the right to basically make declarations that affect anything to do with public health in their own communities. I mean, that is not how this government is supposed to work. I see a lot of different elements of what we've been railing on for years about what's wrong with New York are being basically outed by the pandemic. You see our governor, yesterday even going to see the president again. He was shaking the tin cup, asking for $61 billion, like a third of the state budget. That is an extraordinary sum of money. The rest of the country's eyes, get enormous when you look at sums of money like that. Unfortunately for New York, I've learned through this about the MTA that they carry more debt on the MTA than 42 of the country's states carry. Right. The monstrosity of New York State's debt is being outed here. Obviously, our addiction to spending on Medicaid, and all of that is coming out into the open. Do you think that some positive change can be made through some of this and in the public and stakeholders becoming more interested in what New York's debt structure looks like?
Well, I think, two things. I would like to say I would hope there'd be positive change in the legislature, but I'm not overly optimistic about that. The majority in our House, their answer to anything fiscally is to raise more taxes, and we know what the consequences of that is. More people just be leaving New York State. However, I do think, Chairman, you're right about people getting more engaged. My office with constituent calls is going through the roof. We're working harder than ever now during this pandemic with people either one, not getting their unemployment benefits, but we're also hearing with people upset with what the governor has been doing. So I hope it brings more engagement and gets people out. I think that benefits us because we're on the right side of this issue. And I've heard, it's particularly on that legislation I just laid out, I've heard from Democrats in my district that totally support that, and they're upset about the governor. And one of the problems I think the governor is having, it's bad enough that he's just kind of dictating these things from above, but his decisions to me strike me, they're arbitrary. They're really just making it up as they go along, unfortunately. There's not like some reopening protocol that they're easily following. And you said they face a little bit of public pressure and they flip around, they change it, and there's no predictability. No one knows. The store doesn't know whether they're going to be open, whether they qualify as essential or not essential. And I think that's really leading to a lot of frustration, and people are losing their patience, and rightly so.
Do you think that we're going fast enough on the reopening?
No, we were first out there calling for the regional reopening. We are happy that he listened to us and is doing that. But again, in some counties where the infection rate is so low, it doesn't make sense why they're keeping them closed. So it's one thing to be cautious, but I think it's being overly cautious. Maybe in New York City, maybe in the suburbs where the virus hit harder, there's some reason for that. But I live in Oswego County. We've been doing a lot more testing, so we're up some maybe 20 active cases of a county of 120,000 people. We could do a lot more and do it safely than what's being done now.
I spoke with a home builder yesterday, and he was talking about the inadequacy of the decision making out of the administration. And he's had dialogue with our lieutenant governor, and she is the czar of Western New York's reopening because Andrew doesn't want her at the Capitol. And the discussion of whether or not how many workers could be brought to a site to build a home safely. At first, the approval that came from ESD was for one employee to be able to come to a work site to build a house, right, put on a roof. The people that have no concept of what they're talking about are making decisions here. Right. And that's the terrifying thing. And then someone points out the flaw and then they change it on the fly. It's very obvious that people are just making things up as they go along.
Absolutely. And what's either more frustrating is other states have had reopenings that have gone pretty smoothly because they set out reasonable protocols that people can understand. It's not just, again, one person kind of making decisions on the fly. For instance, you mentioned home builders. I hear from small mom and pop retail stores. For the life of them, they can't figure out why they have to be closed. Well, you have, big box stores down the street where hundreds of people are congregating at. Why is that? That's just, again, it shows that some, randomness, arbitrariness of the whole process.
You see lines outside of Target in Home Depot that, would be sure to spread COVID. Uh, I mean,
Right.
I literally
Right.
watched people get off a bus with their entire family and their kids to stand in line at Home Depot when I was trying to get something curbside. Mind was blown. But
Yeah.
this is what boredom will bring you. People just want to go do something, and your entertainment should not be to go into a crowded store. We need to reopen this economy. We need to get back to work. Otherwise, there's going to be no economy to go back to.
Correct.
Our unemployment rates are scary. I saw several of the upstate counties were in the all led the top on unemployment, and you know we have an entire segment of the the economy that is going to have a really hard time coming back, and that's entertainment, hospitality, hotels, restaurants, a lot of the things that are surrounding business travel. I mean, we're very concerned about it. I mean, do you believe that? I mean, if no federal bailout comes to New York, what do you think our prospects are? Is it a tax increase? Is it payroll taxes? I mean, how do you fill a hole that the governor has declared with really no data that he's released?
Yeah, well, there's definitely going to be a hole if we don't get bailed out. He's talking, 11 to 13 billion dollars shortfall. So how do we fill it? It's going to be a lot of, you know, I think you meant there's going to be some pain. Obviously, there's going to have to be done in spending cuts. Obviously, the majority in the Assembly and probably in the Senate want to raise taxes, but there's no way we're going to be able to tax our way back into fiscal help. I'm optimistic, frankly, though, that we will get some bailout by the feds. I mean, I think they recognize the fact that states are facing real fiscal constraints as a result of the pandemic. But I'm not sure they're just going to bail out New York, and why should they, frankly? But I like the idea of sending money directly to local governments. That seems like a great idea, bypassing the state completely. So I think there'll be some hybrid of that going forward. But ultimately, we putting aside the pandemic and the fiscal crisis we've gotten as a result of the pandemic, as you said, we haven't been keeping our fiscal house in order anyways. As you know, in this budget period, we had a $6 billion shortfall in some of the best economic times the country's ever seen. So if that doesn't point out mismanagement by the governor and the majorities in the legislature, I don't know what else does. But so it's going to be we got a tough road ahead of us. Let's hope we do get, I think some bailout would be very helpful from the federal government. Otherwise, we're going to feel some real pain. But the one thing I'd also mention to you, the legislature and us need to be part of that process. And that's another place where the legislature has to take back some of the power. We can't just, abdicate it all to the governor on that and let him make those tough decisions, because I can guarantee you those aren't going to be the right decisions.
I agree with you completely. I'm very worried about the city. Obviously the city is not just an economic engine for the state, but the city is an economic engine for the nation. And it's going to be an awful long time before New York City is back up and running, and we hope and we pray that it's back up and running at some point like it used to be. But, with what could be flight from, people wanting to be in a dense urban setting, obviously after 3 months of telework, there's going to be a lot of businesses saying that they can save a hell of a lot of money imposing telework, and they can have their employees be anywhere in the country. That could really crush a lot of of what makes New York City the great place that it is. We have an observation here from Peter Hine, one of our great supporters. Our problem in New York City is the local leaders. That becomes a problem for the state as people in our tax base leave to avoid the dysfunction and endless lockdowns. The lockdowns are causing more damage than the virus ever could. This is also a basic civil liberties issue. We are supposed to have a free country, but no longer in New York. What can be done to allow businesses in New York City to reopen now?
Well, they have to keep pushing back. And I think that, the governor is a political animal, and he is starting to feel a little of the stress about people, being frustrated and pushing back. And I'm hearing that from New York City. It used to be, well, that's the epicenter of the pandemic. They're different than the rest of the state. But I think people see the writing on the wall that, these are going to have real lasting effects, long-term effects, both economic and socially, frankly. So I think as that political pressure builds, hopefully, he sees that right on the wall and will start moving towards opening in New York. I don't feel very optimistic. The legislature does have the power through a joint resolution to take back the governor's power. But as I said before, even though privately a lot of Democrats say they would support that, I think probably it's very unlikely that we'll do it, just for political reasons. I don't think that's going to happen.
All
You
right.
know, the interesting, Nick, just to get back a little bit,
Sure.
Peter, I appreciate Peter's comments. You know, New York is so reliant on our high income earners for our tax revenue. And it doesn't take a million people to leave, although that may happen. It only takes a few hundred of those high wealth earners to leave the state, and it puts us in just a terrible fiscal mess. And that's part of the bad management we've done. We've been relying on high taxes and the high wealth people to subsidize our state, and those people are going to fly. There's no reason they have to stay in New York City. And if there's, you know, it looks like business is going to be impossible to do, why stay? And if they can do it remotely anyways, there's nothing holding them there.
One of the other topics I wanted to bring up that's really hit a nerve is when, you know, Cuomo decided to stand up and say, we're going to take this opportunity. And I'm sensing a theme here. They want to use this opportunity and to reimagine education. You know, this is the same logic of Rahm Emanuel of never let a crisis go to waste. And he imposes Bill Gates as one of the leaders of this panel to reimagine education, and saying that in-person education could be a thing of the past. What is your take on that?
Well, I like your analysis about, you know, never letting good crisis go to waste, because I think that's what's happening. But that, interestingly, the pushback on that was so swift and hard. I don't hear much about it now. So hopefully that message got through that, hey, don't pursue this. We went down a similar road with the Common Core, you may recall, and the outcry from our people on the front lines, the teachers, the parents, and obviously the students, was so loud that we eventually were able to push back on that. So I think it's unfortunate, you know, I don't know what he's doing. I think sometimes he just gets up there and starts waxing on about stuff and then gets carried away. But again, that's another reason why the legislature should be involved. The other commission I thought was interesting was the 116-member reopening commission, made up of other wealthy people, and hardly had any representation upstate, or didn't have anyone from the legislature or anyone from small business. It was all very wealthy supporters of the governor on this reopening commission, which, you know, again, seemed very undemocratic to me.
And in an off-the-record setting, in conversations I've had with several members of that panel, they have said, well, you know, it's all BS and there's never going to be a meeting.
Right.
So, I mean, again, it's all show, and there's one person sitting at the decision-making table.
Right.
And one person will never give up that authority willingly. And that's why these Democratic legislative leaders have got to stand up and take it back. If they're truly going to be leaders, if they want to govern, they can't allow us to live in a dictatorship anymore. So, you know, if we're not happy with this, we need to mobilize. We need to elect more members of the state assembly, and we need to elect more Republican state senators. We have the opportunity to do that this year, 2020 being an election year. Obviously, everyone on here is a member of the party or a supporter of the party. We need you now more than ever. You know, I know a lot of people are struggling, having a hard time. If you can support the party, we need your support. You know, go to nygop.org and make a contribution if you can at this time, because we have an excellent crop of candidates. The class of 2020, which, you know, we never got a chance to kind of formally roll out because of a lack of in-person events and the lockdown of the pandemic. I mean, we had a very shortened window to do the nominations, but as I, you know, spend the time with our team at NYGOP, you know, meeting with these candidates one-on-one, some I had done pre-pandemic, but plenty of them, you know, through meetings through Zoom. We have an excellent crop of candidates between the Senate and the Assembly. And in one of these forums in the weeks ahead, we're going to bring, you know, groups of them on so you can meet them because, you know, you need to know what our team looks like. And I think we're very poised and ready. We have some great Assembly candidates. I mean, what do you think the prospects are for the fall?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Before I became leader, I chaired the Assembly campaign team for a number of years, and I would say this year we have our strongest crop of candidates coming in. They're just excellent candidates, and it's not just one part of the state; it's throughout the state. So I'm very optimistic. We set a goal of we'd like to obviously like more, but we're shooting for winning 8 more seats. That would give us over 51 members. It would take away the majority, super majority, which would be critical. It'd be critical to do that. just to recruit a governor, as you know, Chairman, because why would you want to be governor if you veto a bill and the legislature just keep overriding whatever you veto? So getting to 51 would give us a lot of voice and make us more relevant, and hopefully help the party recruit governor candidates coming into next gubernatorial election. But great candidates, and we've had a good team. It's just tough that New York's such a blue state, but we only have one seat, believe it or not, Chairman, that's held, a Republican seat that's held by a Democrat. Otherwise, we hold all our seats. And with the candidates that you've helped recruit and brought to the table and that we have, I'm very optimistic they can pick up some of these Democratic seats and we can win at least 8 more seats, if not more.
Well, I'll tell you, as I meet with them and talk about the campaigns with them, I'm very excited to get back on the road and go campaign with them when the restrictions are lifted, because we have a message to take across the state. You see, Andrew Cuomo's superhuman numbers were almost at 80% approval. He dropped about 13 points in a month. That is going to continue to erode as people see the reality of what a lockdown economy looks like. We got a lot of people that want to ask questions. This has been a great dialogue. I really appreciate your time. But we are going to bring up first Anthony Camus from Brooklyn to join us and join the discussion. Welcome, Anthony.
How are you? One second, please get this set up here. How's everything? So I have actually 2 questions. The first question, I'm an insurance broker here in downstate in the 5 boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens. And one of the things that we're advising our clients is to be prepared for all the lawsuits after they open up, because no one just knows when you could get sick. So what I know on the federal side, they started talking about it, but on the state side, what are we going to do? Are you trying to do about limiting any of these liability exposures that a lot of these small business owners could take, that we'll be faced with? And then 2, when the budget was passed, the governor was saying that there was a shortfall, and we knew that. And one of the biggest drivers was these out of control pensions. And the president's fighting that, I'm not here to bail out your bad policies. Excuse me. What, if anything, can we do now to help rein in some of these out of control spendings on pensions and whatever else can be done?
So a couple of things. Thanks for your questions, and thanks for being on the call. As far as limiting liability, I'm not overly optimistic we'll get anywhere with that in the legislature. I support it. Others in our conference support it. We've advocated for it, but unfortunately we hit a stone wall when it comes to the majority, particularly in the assembly, on that issue. That being said, I am optimistic that the federal government will come up with an agreement. Very often, because of the control, they've come up with policies that affect New York State positively. And I think you might remember that vicarious liability law we had in New York State that we couldn't get changed forever, and then all of a sudden the federal government came in and they overruled New York. And so maybe that will happen with a limited liability, but it will be crucial. Otherwise, it's just one more burden that will be on particularly small businesses that, they're trying to reopen and all of a sudden they'll get sued based on something related to the COVID. So we support it, but I wouldn't hold my breath thinking that some legislation is going to get passed in New York. As far as the pensions and the budget, the pensions, interestingly enough, in New York, although they're very generous, our pension system was relatively well funded because we had some good years with stock market. I think we were at almost fully funded at 98%. So that wasn't the reason we had the budget shortfall. The budget shortfall we had was really a result of overspending in the Medicaid portion of the budget. That being said, with the stock market obviously struggling, pensions are going to become a bigger issue going forward. And we have to be very careful. We can't take the benefits away, but we certainly have to be very mindful of adding to the pension liability going forward, because I don't think that, it's going to take a long time to get the economy back up and get the stock market where it is to be fully funded on the pension thing. So I think we just have to be very wary, and that's where we can play a good role. Is we can't always get the legislation we want passed, but we've gotten pretty adept at stopping legislation. We would certainly work hard if there's some unreasonable pension sweeteners out there to try to slow those down. That's
great. Knowing the rules, the Assembly Republicans can, put a big roadblock up, and we certainly appreciate that, and we need to support that. We also, all right, so we're going to go to Dan next. Hi, Dan.
Hi,
Dan,
you guys.
welcome. I like your hat.
Thank you. I'm a SUNY student, and I'm wondering if there are any talks in regards to reopening the campuses this fall. I feel like a lot of SUNY students are being left hanging right now and in the dark.
Hey, Dan, I like the hat too, and thanks for your question. So that's one of the problems we have with the legislature not being involved on during this pandemic. Sometimes we felt like we were sitting on the sidelines. There really I haven't had any discussions, nor have I heard it from many of my colleagues about, what to do with higher education. And all we do is get proclamations from the governor saying, oh, we'll think about it at a later date. And we don't need to think about it later date. We should be dealing with it right now. And as I said, just generally, the legislature should be part of that because it's affecting, your life and the lives of millions of SUNY students out there. So I think it's illustrative of the problems we're having right across the board is when you have one person making these decisions and then we all sit around waiting for him to make the decision on it. It's not good government, frankly.
That's great. We have a written question from Jack Prendergast, our chairman from Yates County. Under the passage of the budget, Cuomo put in the green light law. This gives illegals that apply for a driver's licenses automatic voter registration, and it stops local law enforcement, local police and sheriffs from communicating and using the New York motor vehicles records when dealing with Border Patrol or ICE. What are your thoughts on that? And I think that's kind of more of a statement than a question, but I know that a lot of us are concerned about the concept of voter security in this next election. I know there's a big national discussion. You're seeing the governor promote voting by mail for June 23rd, mailing an absentee ballot application to each and every voter that has something to vote for. It's something that we're working hard in putting the best legal team together that we can afford to go fight any irregularities that exist there. And we've gone toe-to-toe with the governor already. So that is, something that we're concerned about. Is it, you sense with the legislature coming back into session, I guess, I'll spin this around. Do you see any other changes that they're trying to slide in on these elections?
Yeah, there's one on the agenda right now. Obviously, the governor initially wanted everybody just to get a ballot, realized that you can't do that. It's against the state constitution. You actually have to apply to get an absentee ballot. There's one that would allow, a bill out there that would allow people just to apply over the internet and not have to provide a signature. And so you can see how that, again, is kind of pushing back, where it really opens this up to possible fraud. So we'll see where that goes. We're going to obviously push hard against it. We'll debate the bill and point out that these aren't really, but it's not really about making people, voting more accessible for people. It's really how we can get the Democrats elected in New York State. So we'll keep pushing back on it, but there'll probably be a lot more of those, I think, Chairman, going forward. We just have to be vigilant and make sure that when they do something that's not constitutional, that either we fight it legally and certainly try to fight it legislatively. Can I go back, though, to the green light
You
bill?
sure can. Absolutely.
It pointed out before this pandemic hit, we had a whole list of issues that I think really resonated with New Yorkers, that they couldn't quite understand it. And, bail reform, the green light law was certainly one of them. And particularly the fact that because it doesn't allow our law enforcement to deal with ICE or any of the federal law enforcement, New York got kicked out of the Trusted Travelers program. And that was affecting people. And it seemed it was hard to justify, because why would New Yorkers were given the privilege of driving to people that are here illegally, and the result, people in New York are penalized by not being able to participate in the Trusted Travelers program. I mean, that was such an easy parallel to draw for people that, it was indefensible by the Democrats. There's a whole host of issues like that I think, working with the state party and my colleagues and candidates running, we're going to, revisit those issues and make sure the Democrats are held accountable for passing these crazy bills.
Well, that's what's great about the partnership that we have, with you, Will, is it's a great 1-2 punch. I mean, there's things that the party can more effectively, deliver the message on, but then, governmentally, you come through with a lot of the great messaging and content. We've been, doing our very best to share as much of what is coming out of the Assembly Republican Conference as we can. But we have a team ready to go. They've got excellent, team around around Leader Barclay and partnering with our team at NYGOP. I mean, we're accomplishing some very good things, and we've got to keep that progress going. We've got a thought here before we bring up our next person on video, Dr. Elizabeth Schultz Zimmer. My husband and I are doctors in New York City, and we're outraged at Governor Cuomo's attempt to interfere with a doctor-patient relationship regarding hydroxychloroquine. Is there a committee of doctors to educate the public within the Republican Party? That is a great point, and I will tell you that does not exist, Dr. Schultz Zimmer. It's one that I would love to have a offline discussion with you about coming together and helping us put together that panel of medical experts that can help advise Republican candidates. I mean, but that is something that the party does not have currently. So, anything that you have on that, Will?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you completely. Unfortunately, we don't have a doctor in the legislature. We could use a Republican doctor in the legislature to educate not only me, but particularly educate our Democratic colleagues across the aisle, because I think sometimes they put their head in the sand for political reasons and not really listen to the scientific, or medical reasons of passing or not passing legislation.
Great. So we have, hands raised. If you have a question for us, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll do our very best to get to as many as we can in the time we have left. Next up, we have Brian Rusk, right here from the beautiful town of Amherst in Erie County. Brian, longtime state committee member. Thanks for being with us, my friend.
My pleasure. Hopefully you can see me now.
Now we can.
Yeah, thank you, Leader Barclay and Chairman Nick. Leader Barclay, you had an excellent op-ed on removing emergency powers from Cuomo as the emergency ended weeks ago. I shared this with our Amherst Republican Committee as their chair. Now let's open up all of upstate. Numbers are way down. Let's follow Florida, Georgia with open businesses with 6-foot social distancing and use of masks. Their numbers are way down with opening up, and ours will go down too. Sweden kept the schools open, and their numbers are less than neighboring countries with lockdowns. Children under 20 do not get COVID. Cuomo should lay off state workers paid at home as they're not working, and they should be back at work now with distancing and masks. Nick and Will, thanks for your strong, gifted leadership.
Thank you very much, Brian. I really appreciate that. Our next question is going to be from Vince Casale, the Otsego County Republican chairman.
Hey guys, how are you?
Chairman, I'm good.
I have a quasi strategy question that maybe those of us who like to get our hands dirty during the election season could garner some information and get helpful. But could you possibly share with us, Leader, where some of your targeted seats may be for this fall, where we have an opportunity to pick up seats, or maybe those important seats that we need to protect?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Vincent. Good to see you. I hope you're doing fine during this pandemic, you and your family. So first of all, we got to look at some seats, we write off because we don't think we're going to win. I have great news. We have a seat in the city. Lou Pugliofito is running. He's a doorman down there. The party down there, with the chairman's help, was able to knock the current assemblywoman off the ballot. And he has a very good chance of picking up that seat for Republican. It'll be the first time we have a Republican in the Upper East Side since, I think, John Ravitch was the last time that had held that seat. And that was, before I was in the assembly. So it was a long time ago. So there's one we feel very good about. He's a great candidate. He's going to be a hard worker, and one we never probably expected to pick up. And that would be great, because that's what we need to do, is start picking up seats where we maybe traditionally can't win them. We have, you might recognize the name Mike Glawler. He used to be the executive director of the state party. He's running down in Rockland County. He's doing a great job. The chairman and I did a Zoom call with his supporters a couple of weeks ago now, I think. But I feel very strong about picking up a seat in Rockland County. Moving up the state, we got the Capital Region with this Angelo Santa Barbara, who's an Assembly Democrat now. We think we can beat him with this guy, Paul DiLorenzo, who's been a great candidate, hard worker out there. It's a seat the registration would indicate that we potentially pick up. Some of you may have heard this guy, Jessica, I don't know if you're still on the call, we ever hear of a guy named Dave Catafamo. He's running in the seat, the one seat that's a Republican seat held by a Democrat, held by Kerry Warner. And he's been fantastic so far. He's running a great campaign and shown a lot of energy. So I feel pretty good about his chances. Moving over to Central New York, one that's kind of a personal one that for me, because I'm from the area, we got Mark Vineski running an Al Sturpey's seat. That's a seat that we've held in the past. We think we can win. He's a former town supervisor, so we feel pretty strong. He knows how to run. He's got some good name recognition. And then Chairman, you've been intimately involved with these seats out in Western New York. We've got 4 great candidates out in Western New York, and I feel very good about our chances there. So those are just a few. I mean, those are some of those are what 9 or 10 I mentioned. But there are other people out there.
2020 is very robust,
Yeah.
and that's why we need your help. We have the candidates. I mean, a successful campaign becomes from 3 elements. It starts with a great candidate. Then it's message. We have plenty of message. We have more message than we know what to do with or can get out. But we need the resources to deliver that message. And these times like these make you understand that the people we elect into public office matter. And this is, in good times, anyone can serve in government. In bad times, we need the right people to serve in government. And we need a louder voice. I mean, certainly we need a stronger, voice for upstate New York, as, all of the leadership, is from, the downstate region. And, clearly through Andrew Cuomo's decisions, he didn't understand how to, unleash and unshackle the people of upstate New York. So we have a lot of other folks that have joined us here, but those are great opportunities to grow this. Joe Casper coming to us from Queens. Welcome, Joe.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, just a moment. We're muted. Yeah. Mr. Chairman and Assembly Leader Barclay, my name is Joe Casper. I have the honor of serving with my co-leader as the Republican State Committee member and district leader for 27 years from Queens County's 31st Assembly District, which wraps around Kennedy Airport. Unfortunately, our district has the distinction of having 3 of the 10 zip codes that have the highest COVID fatalities in New York City, and just coincidentally, a large number of nursing homes. Unfortunately, our district is unrepresented in the New York State Assembly since last year because our assembly member became a judge on January 1st. We had a Republican Assembly candidate, Mr. Joseph Kalina, in the special election on April 28th of this year that was postponed till June, then canceled altogether. Fortunately, he's on the ballot for November. But both of you gentlemen, what do you think of the special election for Assembly being canceled in the 31st District? And what can you do to help Republican Assembly candidates in the city in general in Queens County?
I'll let you start out, leader.
Yeah, well, I think what we're trying to do throughout the state is no difference, upstate, downstate, or wherever you are. I think the message of what the Democrats are doing and in this pandemic, what the governor's been doing, I think resonates with people, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. So I think we have to continue to get our message out. I think if there's any failings we might have not done as well as we could, and what I'm trying to change is, as a leader, is to have a bigger presence in New York City. And I want to work with Chairman Langworthy and others to accomplish that. We shouldn't be ceding ground anywhere, particularly on the issues that the Democrats have given us to run on. I think they can resonate anywhere. So, you're going to see a much bigger presence from me personally down in the city, but you're going to see a much bigger presence from some of the Republicans in the city and other places in the state where traditionally maybe we haven't played as hard as we should on these. So I'm thrilled. One of the big things we work on is try to make sure we have a candidate in every race. You never know what the circumstance holds, and even sometimes it's long shots. Sometimes the long shots come in. Yeah, so I'm thrilled that the candidate's running there, and we would support him the best we can.
And, I will just, go along with that sentiment. I mean, I traveled to all 62 counties of the state last year, spent extensive time in every borough and throughout the state. I was in New York City almost every single week, from the time I was elected last July. It's been very strange to be home for now 77 days and not on the road, but I suppose it took a pandemic to slow us down. But we're very eager to get back up and running. And, I know our next participant is someone that helps us out, one of the co-chairs of our policy committee, former candidate for New York City Controller, John Burnett. Welcome, John.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We sure can.
Awesome,
John.
awesome. Well, thanks for your time today. I have a simple question. Let me just provide a disclaimer. It's not well thought out because it just crossed my mind. But I'm thinking if New York receives some type of federal funds, is there a way to kind of reposition some of these boards, let's say the MTA and any other type of pension board, where it's a mix of not just a stockpile of liberals, but some fiscal conservatives, to make sure that, yes, if the money is received going forward, that we have a level of check and balance and fiscal responsibility on how things are run and operated going forward.
I think it's an excellent point, John. I think that's the point of contention in Washington right now. It's not so much providing the states money, but how it's going to flow to the states. And that's why I raised the point about, maybe going directly to local governments and localities versus kind of being funneled through the state, where the governor would be able to hand it out in the way or to where in his discretion. So I think you'll see, I don't know about, the boards and trying to rearrange those. I think if it's brought to, whether it's Mitch McConnell or the minority leader in the Congress, attention, so they can help negotiate, it's not a bad idea. There's probably 100 ideas like that probably should be implemented. It's just good government for providing, massive aid to states.
No, thanks for the observation, John. What do we got next? I think we've got Denise from Westchester. Join us. Hello, Denise.
Hi. Sorry, my internet keeps going in and out.
Okay.
Hi there. Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Hi there. Hi. Sorry.
Hi.
My internet keeps going in and out. What's the likelihood of undoing the preponderance of the governor's power grab laws? And I mean, I heard you say that the Democrats are afraid to push back. But what's the likelihood of undoing that stuff? And like going back to at least as bad as it was before, which was bad enough.
Right. So I think as public outrage grows, the likelihood of doing something gets better and better. The only problem we have with passing legislation, of course, we might even pass it in the legislature, but you still got Governor Cuomo who will probably veto it if he gets that far. So that's ultimately going to be the problem. But I think the more noise that we bring to this, that's why I think that letter to the editor we did for the Post resonated so much, because people are really at their wits' end. And when they see that, they look for solutions. And one of the solutions is obviously taking that power away. So I don't think it's an impossibility by any stretch. And I think, we're all political animals. If our constituency gets more and more outraged by it, I think there's a chance something could happen with it. And what we try to do, frankly, we obviously are in the minority. We like to throw bombs, but we also like to provide some nuanced legislation from time to time. And I think that's why I think this bill that we did, we're not saying the governor can never declare a state of emergency. Frankly, the executive branch is a more efficient way to govern at times, but he shouldn't have it with no strings attached. And there ought to be some sort of guide rails on it. That's why I like this piece of legislation. I think it's a very reasonable approach to it. And there's no reason it can't be taken up in a bipartisan manner. Or they can do it, the Democrats can pass it, they can have full credit for it, and we don't even mind. We'll still support it. So I think the long and short of it, I think it's still a long shot on this thing, but I think people are getting pretty outraged out there, and as that increases, I think the likelihoods get better to get something done.
Great observation. We have some written questions here. David Madden, hey guys, I appreciate everything you do. As an essential worker, I've been up close to everything that's been going on in the public since the pandemic began. The issue of wearing masks has begun to create a great deal of hostility within citizens and businesses, with a large pool of scientific data that does not support medical masks or face cloths as effective against the spread of particles. Do you believe it's truly necessary and constitutional to impose this upon every single member of the community? Thank you. This is something that there's a lot of debate on. The problem is if you play back the tape on all the public officials from when this started to today, you get these varying degrees of them conflicting each other. At the beginning, it's like, don't wear a mask. Now, obviously, they didn't want to make a run on the PPE marketplace because our doctors and nurses and people needed it. But now, I believe face masks are going to be something that is going to be part of, our lives for, the foreseeable. What's your take on things, Will?
Yeah, I think this is a tough thing. We want to listen to experts, but then the experts sometimes are all over the place, and you don't know what their motivation is or what their ability to advise on. I tend to err a little bit on why not. It's better safe than sorry. But, then you see the numbers coming out. Someone mentioned about, how New York State, our numbers are so bad, where other places where they've opened up or not been so restrictive, their numbers are better. So they're at the very least, we need to have especially on the state level, we need to have some hearings and go back and look at how this whole pandemic was handled. And we will need to get experts. I hate to say, we'll need to get doctors in there to help us understand that issue. So, the face mask, yeah, I think I find them annoying too, but my theory is better safe than sorry, I guess, to some extent.
I mean, to go into a store, to go into, a pharmacy, I got no problem putting one on. I mean, I'm not going to wear one on a walk or,
Right.
taking my daughter on a bike ride. I mean, it's just, at some point, it's stupid. But you see these viral videos where people are publicly shaming others for not wearing them. I mean, I don't see a problem when you're forced into situations where you're have to be close to others. Why that's it's not offensive to me to have to do it, but obviously there's going to be a lot of personal preference in that. JP has written in a question: who'd be the best candidate to run against Cuomo, and are you concerned? Not concerned, but are you supportive of a member of the Trump family running? That's a very interesting observation. Obviously, here's what I'll say about who's going to run against Andrew Cuomo. Everything's on the table. We've been in discussions with people. It's way too early to start putting people and names out there before the 2020 election, but everything's on the table. We are going to find the best and the brightest candidate that we possibly can to run for the chief executive of the state of New York, because the only way to change New York is to change governors of the state of New York. So all I say to you is stay tuned. The next person we have joining us is Jeff Williams. Welcome, Jeff.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Now we can.
Sorry about that. All of a sudden my computer froze for a second. Hey, Leader, how are you? Hi, Nick.
Hey, Jeff. Good. Nice
so I'm going back to policy, and it's more on insurance at this point. I've talked to a lot of people about their business interruption insurance recently, and as you know, as an attorney and a legislator, those claims are all being at this point denied. Is there any legislation right now proposed on in the insurance committee, possibly even about business interruption insurance? So a lot of people are thinking of getting rid of their business interruption insurance because it never pays out for any reason whatsoever.
Right.
And it's almost like just an extra policy to have for no reason. If there was a real time for business interruption, it would have been right now.
Right. Well, a couple of things. Yes, we've heard a lot about that. There are, I think, a number of bills out there that would allow people to recover under their business interruption insurance. The problem is, I don't like to do things retroactively. If the policy didn't allow that, then we can't all of a sudden mandate that they've got to start covering that type of, we saw it during the natural disasters with flood insurance. Everybody thought they had flood insurance. Turns out they didn't have it, or the damage wasn't caused by the actual The flooding was actually caused by the storm that made them disqualify for it. So I think there's something we can look at proactively on that, but I would be hesitant to support anything that would retroactively. It's not fair to the other policyholders that have to pay premiums too, to try to, to allow someone to recover under business interruption retroactively.
So our last caller is Bobby Walker. Welcome, Bobby.
Hello.
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for including the college Republicans on this call. My question was just a quick question. With everything going on, it's been really hard for a lot of students to stay involved with campaigns and activities like that, and in government stuff as well. I know a lot of students sort of had to step away from their internships. What are some things that students can do right now to stay involved, both in terms of the party and also with the government as well for the leader?
You want me to take that one, or do you want to talk about?
Well, you could go first and I'll close it up.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for all you're doing for the Republican Party. We have to continue to engage young people in the party, and I'm thrilled that you're willing to take that leadership role and do that. I think, it's not just young people right now. I think this pandemic's caused anybody that might be politically active, some challenges doing it. But I think doing like this town hall meeting, we're looking at a whole host of different things to do through the summer to keep people engaged and make sure our message is getting out. We're definitely under a different paradigm where I used to probably go out and do rallies and speak, and now I have to do it all virtually. But that's stuff we just have to get used to. But I think the way we get young people continue to be involved is our message. And I think it can resonate with young people. We need leaders like you to help us push that message and be engaged.
And I'll just, close with the fact that, the digital army that the college Republicans, the young Republicans, the different youth organizations have is a great bridge for our candidates as they get into a new way of campaigning. We've had to retool every campaign in the state of New York. We've had to retool the way that the state Republican Party functions. And in having young people incorporated into those campaigns is critically important for us. So thank you for all that you do, Bobby, as the head of the state college Republicans. Thank you to all the young people that are helping our candidates right now. You are not just the future, you're the present. And we need that energy and that youth to continue, and we need to recruit more. Because if a party is not growing, it's dying. And I firmly reject the concept that there are not young people that are actively engaged in the Republican Party, because I know that's the way I came up through this process. And everywhere I go, every community, there are young people involved in the Republican Party. We're going to grow that. We're going to continue to that progress that we've made. So we're at the 1 o'clock hour. We've got to let the leader get back to work since he's been kind enough to cut an hour out of his day from us at the Capitol. Thank you so much, Will, for being with us. Keep up the great work, and let's hold this governor and this state government accountable. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back next week. Thank you so much,
Thanks
Will.
a lot, Chairman. Yep, take care, everybody. Stay safe. Bye-bye.